Okay. So I was going to open with a example of one of the undertolds that we've done. If we can get to the next slide, or I think it's 2 slides. There we go. Um, so in Bastrop County, the Mina Ward School, Mina Ward is not somebody's name. The Ward schools were neighborhood schools. That's still a term that you might hear some places. And Mina was the pre-Anglo name for Bastrop when it was a municipality of Mexico. And so many of you, as good researchers and stewards of Texas history, may know that Texas, for many years, had separate schools for African American children, but some of you may not know that there were also separate schools in many communities for Mexican American children. And so the Mina School was opened in Bastrop, and it was not only for recent arrivals from Mexico who lacked English proficiency, but it was really based on surname. And so part of it was just anybody with a Hispanic last name, even if they were fourth, fifth, sixth generation in the community. So the Mina Ward School was open in Bastrop and was open for years. And one of the students' family took it upon the sake of their grandchild to take that case to court. That much like with the African American students and schools, the separate Hispanic schools were underfunded, didn't have the same materials and the same opportunities as the Anglo school in town. And so there was an important court case in 1947 in Austin that affected some districts in Austin and Travis and Bastrop counties, including Bastrop, that declared that the school was unconstitutional, that it was not a valid way to separate the students out to say that it was based on their heritage rather than any learning problems. So after this ruling, several of these schools closed around the state, not all. A lot of them stayed for a few more years because there was also a provision that if you really needed to have a separate kindergarten, first, second grade for students that had no English proficiency, there was a chance to teach them some basic English words and phrases so that they can get caught up. And that's actually the subject of another undertold marker we'll talk about another day. But we'll show you some of the materials from this Mina Ward School, which was actually the 100th undertold marker dedicated. And we'll go over some of these requirements and details in a minute, but this was the application form. For those of you who have applied for regular markers, you know that the application form has a lot of information. We require a 5-page or more double-spaced footnoted narrative. And so the undertold form is just front and back of one page, basically. And we'll show you in a little bit that now this is all online through a portal, so you don't even have to use a paper form as an attachment. But the idea is that instead of a 5-page narrative, if you have 250 words, if you have the basic story, sort of an abstract, that's enough for us to evaluate if that sounds like a good candidate. And so that's what you have here from Mina Ward School. They did about 250 words. We asked for 2 or 3 sources. If there's some article or a chapter of a book or some good archives locally that would help us to work on that research, then that will help us to develop a narrative. And so this is one that was selected. We'll check the next slide here. Mina Minerva Delgado was the student, and she was, I think she may recently have passed. She lived much longer than this. And so there's a photo of her reading the story of the court case, later in life. I think she was 7 years old at the time. And there's a picture of the Mina Ward School. And you see a couple of citations there, including Chapter 7 of Gene Preuss's book on Texas education called Delgado v. Bastrop. And he goes into great detail about the significance of that case and the background and the people involved. And then this is what we hope the Undertold marker concludes with in your community, is that here's a dedication with a lot of alumni from the school, a lot of people from the neighborhood, that even within the community, this story was almost forgotten, except by people who went to that school or had families that went to that school. There wasn't really anything on the landscape with this name anymore. And so this marker is actually, I think it's sort of catty corner from where the school was, where there's now Minerva Delgado Park. And so they've also got information about her and about the community there. And we were happy to go to the celebration for the 100th Undertold marker. So I believe at this point, I'm going to turn things over to Alicia, who will walk you through what Undertold markers are all about.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. An undertold marker is, or an undertold application is a way to receive a Texas historical marker. And so I'm just going to walk you very shortly through that process. If you're interested in our marker program, we do have other webinars where we go in depth with it, but this is just sort of focusing on what is the undertold within the existing marker program. As you might know, if you are familiar with our marker program, we do offer 3 different types of markers, and this is based on the topic. I'll actually start on the right of your screen, which is an RTHL. That is the state historic designation for Texas. So that's designating a historic building and telling a little bit of the interpretation about why that building is important or matters. In the middle, you'll see the HTC, that stands for Historic Texas Cemetery, and those are our cemetery markers. And on the left, you'll see our subject markers. These are stories of Texas history. They can cover people, communities, institutions, places, etc. So there are 3 different types of markers. And as we can see on this slide, Undertold, if you're maybe having a question of which kinds of marker can I receive through Undertold, Undertold is basically an application to get any one of our 3 markers. So if your question is maybe, can my cemetery receive an Undertold marker? The answer is yes. You can get either a subject, an HTC, or a RTHL marker through the Undertold process. It's just basically a different way to apply for the same kind of marker. On the actual marker itself, you can't tell whether it's an Undertold marker or through the regular program. So our Undertold marker program began in 2006, and it was intended to address historic and geographical gaps in the marker program. So when we mean Undertold, we're talking about topic, but we're also talking about region. It is funded through the $100 application fee for regular markers. So if you have ever paid that $100 application fee for a marker through our regular program, thank you for contributing to the Undertold Fund. We really appreciate it. Our applications for Undertold are accepted in the fall. And if you want to write this down, this will be on a slide later. But if you're wanting to take notes on this, it's usually October 1st to November 15 every year. And as Bob mentioned, we've done over 260 Undertold markers, and still counting. We do 15 markers a year, and that's because that's what's in our work plan that the commission sets for us. So we only can do 15 a year. So every year we get 15 closer to 300 to 500 to 1,000. And the funded topics in the marker program receive a free large marker or the equivalent in historic research, but I think we've always done markers. So there's the link for more information, thc.texas.gov/undertold. And if Lorelei can put that in the chat as well, that would be great. Thank you. So there are 2 ways to apply for a marker, as I mentioned. This is more of the breakdown of how is the Undertold program different from the regular program. So as we can see, whereas the regular program is accepted in the spring, in March through May, the Undertold program is accepted in the fall. The regular program requires a longer application than the Undertold. The regular program requires a 5-page documented narrative, whereas the Undertold only requires 250 words. With the regular program, there's an application fee of $100. With the Undertold program, there's no fee. And for the regular program, the cost of the marker is the responsibility of the sponsor. Whereas if you're accepted through the Undertold program, that marker is free. So no cost to the sponsor with the Undertold program. For the regular program, the CHC does review and submit the application to the THC. And in the Undertold program, although it is recommended that they're consulted, they don't need to approve the application ahead of time. But the biggest thing I want you to notice there on this slide is the acceptance rate. For a regular program, it is an 80 to 90% acceptance rate. But for our Undertold program, because we only produce 15 of them a year, and we get about 100 applications a year, our acceptance rate is somewhere between 15 to 20%. So that's the benefits and the drawbacks for each one. You can take a look and see what you feel would be comfortable for you and that topic that you love. So let's go into what I submit for the Undertold. We're going to go through what the submissions, sort of the bullet point of what to submit. We're going to look at each one, what that actually looks like for each piece of the puzzle. And we're also going to look at an example for each one. So for the Undertold program requirements, we need a completed application form. And again, Bob showed it, 1-page completed application form. We'll also go in and look at exactly what that application form has on it. We need a property owner consent for where we think the marker is going to go. Because like I like to tell folks, we don't just run around sticking markers in Texas. We do need property owner consent for that marker to go. We need proof of ownership, meaning did the person who signed the property owner consent, do they actually have proof that they own that piece of land? And the 250 words that Bob already mentioned and we already saw on that application piece, or if you already have a completed narrative history, that's very helpful. And I did want to note here that if you're going to apply for an RTHL, meaning that state designation for a building or a structure, we do also need a couple of other things to make sure that it qualifies for RTHL, such as a photo, historic photo, photos of all sides of the structure, a site plan, which is basically a bird's eye view of what's on the site and where it is and what's historic and what's not historic. For instance, you may have a 1910 church, but a 1980s fellowship hall, right? So we just kind of need to know what is on the site, whether it's historic or non-historic. And then we need a floor plan of what you're actually designating. Again, that's only if you're going to designate a structure. If we're going to tell the story of the church, for example, but we're not going to designate the structure, we would just need those top 4 things. Here's visually what that application packet looks like. At the top, you see the application. Then you see the landowner permission and the proof of ownership. Then you see that narrative, the 5 pages versus the 250 or the optional 5-page narrative. And whereas regular applications require an application fee, the Undertold does not. Here's your upcoming dates for this year. If you're like, I'm ready, let's go, let's get this going. October 1st through November 15th is our next application period for Undertold. So that is the time period where you want to submit your application. We unfortunately do not take them on September 30th, and we do not take them on November 16th. But if you submit October 1st through November 15th, we will get it. And if you submit during that time, we do score them, review them, and you will be notified. The topics are selected and successful sponsors are notified the first week of February in 2016. 2026. I'm 10 years behind. It's fine. Okay, so let's look at each piece of this form. Here we have the Undertold program application and the landowner consent form. If you download the paper application, there's 2 ways to submit. You can do online or what we call the paper application. It's a PDF. If you download the PDF, this is what you will see. So we're going to go through each piece, but just know that the online application is an online version of this document. So it does not ask more questions. It does not, it's basically instead of typing them into a PDF, you would type it in online. It's really the only difference. So for the application, it's going to ask you your proposed title and what county it's going to be located in. It's going to ask for a proposed location. So let's say you're doing a community marker, right? You want to honor a community that's no longer there. You can decide and say, maybe we'll put this in text out right away, or we have a landowner who wants this marker. And so we're going to, put an address or a site, etc. Then it's that 250 word description of the topic and 3 suggested resources for further research. And then at the very bottom, it's your contact information. And that's just so we can notify you that you got the marker. For the landowner consent form, it asks again, is this going on TxDOT right of way? We ask that because if it is going on TxDOT right of way, the THC and TxDOT coordinate that. You don't have to worry about it at all. If you're not sure where the marker's going, for instance, if it is a community, it used to be a crossroads and you're not really sure where it should go or it's not site specific, TxDOT right of way is a good option for you to check where you won't have to do anything else after. But if you do have a site, you do have a property owner, we would need their information there and their signature. So here's our example. Wood Street Settlement at Shoal Creek is a 2016 Undertold in Travis County. And I'm going to walk you through what their applications look like. And so you can get an idea of what a successful marker application could potentially be. So here's their original application form. Again, very basic. They do have a fair amount of sources there. But again, that's not a requirement. It's just 2 or 3 that are required. And their sources look like a Sanborn map, maybe some, documentation that has already been written. Maybe it's a primary document on the portal, etc. And then they're going to put it in Austin in a park. And so the Austin Parks and Rec Department representative signed it. Then they had to submit proof of ownership. TaxNet USA is a great website that you can use. Basically, we're looking at, does current property ownership match who signed the form, who signed the landowner form, right? So this is a great website. I also recommend, if you want to screenshot, go to your county appraisal district and screenshot or download a PDF of that information. That's perfectly fine with me. It takes about a minute and a half to do to do this, and I can show you, I can walk you through it. If you're having trouble, give us a call or send us an email. We can walk you through it. But we're just looking that that property name matches the application form. So here's the narrative. Again, you can do 250 words, which is required, or you can, if you already have a the longer narrative, you can submit that as well. If you're submitting the longer narrative, we would like to see in-text citation and a bibliography, or if you want to do footnotes. Basically, you know me, I'm an old, like, jaded historian at this point. So I read everything with where'd they get that? How'd they find that information out, right? Where can I look this up? Or if it's something really exciting, I'm like, ooh, I want to know more about that. What are these documents that I can use? So I want to know where you got your facts, and they're cited down there. And so that is very helpful when we're reading those, those narratives, to know where the information is coming from. And I have people every day reach out to our marker program to ask for narratives 20, 30, 40, 50 years after they were written. And those footnotes are key, because you may have only been writing about one person or a church, but that person's really interested in this club or that specific family. And those footnotes are crucial. We also would love photos and maps if they're helpful, but they're not required. And we love critical biographical information as well. So this really equates to birth and death dates. If you can tell us, hey, this is where this person was born, that's great. If you can tell us, cite it in there, like 1880 census says it's this, but it's actually Y. Anything that you have that would help us to not only write that marker, but also to help future researchers in decades, long after we've all forgotten that this is a thing. Some researcher is going to pick up the torch and keep it going. And you may be thinking to yourself, wow, that sounds like a lot, too much, actually. It's been decades since I was in school. That sounds awful. I do want to note that the marker research guides are available on our website. They give you not only lists of things, sort of research hints, but they also give you a sample narrative. So once you read it, I always like to tell people once you read it, it doesn't look as bad as it sounds. So it feels a little bit more doable once you actually read a 5-page narrative and you go, oh, okay, I think I can do that. And these are broken down by topic. So schools, biography, community, cemeteries, we have one, a marker research guide for each kind of marker. So here's what Wood Street School or Wood Street community submitted. And you can see that they have sent us some zoning papers from the city of Austin, some photos, etc. You can submit lots of different kinds of documentation. But then we did take that and we put that, or uh, someone, I don't remember who did it, but that became a longer narrative. So I will say, if you don't write the narrative, our summer interns might get to writing the narrative. So I would definitely recommend working on the narrative, um, in the meantime, if you can. I'll also note actually over here while we're on this page that, like I mentioned, the narrative is not required, but it is helpful. I'll say that. It is helpful because it helps the committee as they're scoring to understand what the topic is and why it's significant. But it also helps, even if you can only submit the smaller stuff during the submission process, it helps to at least get started on the narrative. Let's say it's not 5 pages by November 15th, that's okay. Um, but it helps to start working on the narrative even after November 15th, because if you're not accepted for the undertold, then your narrative is ready to submit during the regular marker application the next year. So let's say you submit, in November, you keep working on that narrative, you keep working on it in February when you hear, oh, maybe you weren't selected, you already have that narrative to go for March 1st when the regular application period opens. I'll also note that when we email you in February, if you are selected, one of the things we will ask for is a narrative. So, hey, if you have a narrative, that's great. If you can work on the narrative, that's great. But it's really helpful to have immediately because then we can get going right away and writing that marker sooner than waiting and then until we have time to work on it and then drafting the inscription from that. It does definitely push things back a bit. Okay, so how will my undertold application be scored? Here is the scoring criteria. You can take a look. It is scored by committee. I like to tell people I don't select these markers. The good news is I don't select the markers, and the bad news is I don't select the markers. So it is done by a committee of THC staff. And we are looking and scoring based on this criteria. So diversity of topics for addressing gaps in the marker program itself. And again, that could be topic and it could also be region. Maybe we don't have any markers from, or very, very few markers from this county. That automatically gets a bump because that county is undertold in the marker program. Maybe it's this certain topic that we've never had a marker on before. That topic gets a bump because it's an untold topic within our marker program. Then it's endangerment level of that site, topic, or property. Then it's the historical or architectural significance. Remember, you can submit for a building marker, right? So anytime you see architectural, if you're going for designation, that's for you. Architectural or historic integrity, the relevance to our statewide preservation programs, DHC support and existing documentation, and then diversity among this group of candidates. So of all of the 100 undertold marker applications we received that year, we're looking for, let's give markers to lots of different topics, right? So that is our scoring. So what's the first step if you're unsure, if you're like, okay, I feel like I understand what I need to submit, but I'm not sure, I have questions or I need someone to bounce thoughts off of. The first thing I want you to do is determine your correct marker type. For example, if you're trying to save a structure, please do not submit an undertold for a cemetery marker, right? Um, are you trying to get grants, for example, for your building? You should go for the RTHL marker. Are you just trying to get the story out there, but the landowner of the building does not want a designation, does not want the state to tell them what they can do with their building? You'll want to go for a subject marker. And if you're unsure of which type of marker is right for your story or situation, contact your CHC, talk through it with them. Contact us at the THC, talk through it with us. If you are interested in the RTHL or the building state designation, we can do what's called a preliminary review, where we look at the building or we look at the photos you send and we can say, yes, this probably will, meets the criteria, or no, this probably doesn't meet the criteria. Before you do all of the other stuff, you can know officially. Then we suggest reach out to your community. Let other people know because it's amazing how pieces of the story come up after you start telling people. If you're doing a marker about a school, they say, oh, hey, my mother went to that school. She still has her yearbook. Let me get it to you. Or, oh, my sister was a teacher at that school. She has, grade books, whatever, etc. Letters of support are accepted, but they are not required. So sometimes we get letters of support from city councilmen, mayors, folks like that. If you want to submit them, we do accept them, but they're not required. But we do recommend reaching out to the community and contacting your CHC, knowing that, letting them know that you're going to submit the application, etc. So if you're going to submit the paper application, now online, all you have to do is click the submit button and you are done. You'll get an email that says your marker application was submitted. But if you have a paper application, you would email it to us. These are just some tips for submitting that email. Basically, we're putting in the subject line, the county, and then we're attaching those as documents, that application packet. And then we are sending it to that address on screen, markers@thc.texas.gov. And we're submitting them on time, which is October 1st through November 15th. And hopefully you will receive an email like this, which is the Wood Street School acceptance letter. It does get emailed out. So sometime in early February, you'll receive an email that is basically like, congratulations, you were one of the 15 topics selected. And I want you to read your acceptance letter very carefully and see if we are requesting any items. So often we will request some additional, shipping information, for example. We will also request a narrative if you haven't already submitted it. If you are not accepted, though, please consider applying through the regular application program. And we do often have, I would say every single year, we have folks who try to apply through the Undertold program because, hey, if you can get a free marker, try to get a free marker. And then if they're not accepted, they go through the regular program. And then Wood Street School or Wood Street Settlement had a dedication. Here's some photos of that dedication, which is very exciting. Please go visit it the next time you're in Travis County. And now I'm going to turn it back over to Bob, and he's going to show you some successful application examples.
I'm glad you asked that question. That's the next question in your mind. What are some successful application examples? Well, let's get to a few more and show you what ones that we've been proud to put markers up for in recent years. So here is an RTHL example. It's the Hidalgo Park Kiosco That would be the Spanish word for kiosk, I believe, or gazebo, in Harris County in Houston, and it's in the Magnolia Park neighborhood, which I believe was a separate city and then got absorbed by Houston. So a lot of connections to community there. But you can see that it's a structure there in the park. On the next slide, you'll see the application that they turned in. Again, 250 words, enough of an abstract there for us to understand what it is, what are the who, what, when, where, and why of what it's about. Give a couple examples of suggested sources there. You see they've got a Houston Chronicle article from 1934 about that being dedicated, and some other city records. And then at that point, I think we have just the application submitted by, and not the property owner information that came as a separate attachment. But this was enough for the committee to say that this was something unique in that year's candidates and all the ones we've done at that point. This is called faux bois. Say that with me. It's fun. Faux bois. Fauxbois, meaning like fake tree. So this is concrete, and it's built to look like it's timbers and natural materials. There was a man in San Antonio, Dionisio Rodriguez, who did many of those. This is a man in Houston named Vidal Lozano, and he was a professional metal worker. And as far as we know, this is the only architectural, artistic expression he ever made. And he actually died a couple years after this. So this was, I think this is it. So just a very unique structure and community gathering space. It's a bandstand, and people have had gatherings and weddings and everything there. Um, so when this one came to us, it stood out because it was an RTHL. When we get, say, 80 to 100 applications a year for undertolds, maybe 3 to 5 are for RTHLs. So that's something that if that's that the property owner is willing to accept that designation, that helps with the scoring. And the next slide will show you some of the information that they sent. There is a program called HABS. Now that you remember faux bois, make that your new catchphrase. HABS, Historic American Building Survey. This is from the 30s. It's a program, a New Deal program that's still in existence. It's for documenting our built heritage of the United States, now more than 90 years. These drawings are kept at the Library of Congress, and they're online. I urge you go to that webpage, HABS. It's under the National Park Service, and look up your county, your community for all the properties that have been documented through this. In this case, this is 1997, so this is before they turned in the Undertold. Either professional architects, or in a lot of cases now students at undergrad and grad programs in Texas, do these very detailed drawings and documentation of these objects. And so you've got photographs, you've got history researched, and you have these professionally drafted drawings that are accurate to within, I think it's a 1/4 inch or an 1/8 inch. And so these were all hand drawn from the 1930s up till 20 or so years ago, and now they're like computer aided design, CAD design. But you can see we've got all this cross section and elevation and information about the kiosko, and then that becomes the site plan, that there's a professionally done site plan. So all of this helped with their application, that this was ready to go. It was well documented. It was professionally done. And then here you see that I think they also had the narrative at the time. I think it says in their application, and I'll see also attached. And if it's not, it's something that they developed later. And that's Chris Varela from the Harris CHC. If you're out there, Chris, nice to see you. And you see that the 5-page or so narrative is not necessary at the time of applying for Undertold, but it's something that we will develop with you if you're selected. So if you already have something, that's great, because that just helps us see that it's more developed and better researched than ones that are just kind of the initial kernel of an idea that might be a good topic, but it's somebody just kind of starting at the beginning. And as Alicia mentioned, we have several every year that if they're not selected, they apply a second time and maybe a third time, and they improve their application, or they pull together some more facts, or they pin down where it was going to go. They didn't quite know where it was going to go, but now they have landowner permission. And you're free to do that for as long as you're willing to be patient, and do that once a year for undertolds. I feel like maybe somebody's turned it in a fourth year or a fifth year and been accepted that year. So there's no limit on how many times you want to turn it in if you just want to be patient once a year and wait for us to score it with all the others. And then there's the dedication, lots of coverage in the Houston Chronicle. Um, and so I know that one's still there and still in good shape. So we're glad that that got the designation. Here's another example up in Denton County. It's the Harrington, Cassidy, and Clark cemeteries. So Harrington Cemetery is an 1870s African American cemetery. At this location, it was a little more than an acre. And then Cassidy and Clark cemeteries were further out in the countryside away from the community, and they were going to be inundated by the construction of a lake, Louisville Lake, in the 1950s. And so the Army Corps of Engineer reinterred the remains, moved them to Harrington, made this combined cemetery that now represents, a larger portion of Denton County's African American history. And each of them has its own section, and they kept as many of the headstones and any cultural artifacts as they could. And so this cemetery marker not only goes along with the Historic Texas Cemetery designation that they got for all three of these combined, but helps tell the story of all three of those and kind of gave direction to, well, Cassidy was 3 miles down this road and Clark was up this way. And both those sites are now under Lake Louisville. So there's, or Louisville Lake. If you're out there, tell me which way that is. Lake Louisville, Louisville Lake. Um, that's the best place to interpret that now because you can't get any closer because it's covered by the lake now. And here again, their application, you see that they turned in the 250 words. I don't think there was an additional narrative ready at the time, but this one just filled a good need in Denton County where not a lot of African American topics had been told up to that point. We're happy to say that through the Undertold program and the regular program, Denton County has identified a lot of more stories that really round out the storytelling in Denton County, identifying groups and sites and topics and even chronology. Sometimes counties were very active in the marker program in the 1960s and 70s, and all of the topics stop in the 1800s. And now we have World War I topics to talk about, and Art Deco, and World War II, and even Cold War topics that now may qualify for markers. So that's also part of what Undertolds can be for, is just kind of stories that aren't so well represented at the county level or at the state level. And here's photographs they sent of Harrington, Clark, and Cassidy. You can see there's a lot of historic gravestones there. All three of these cemeteries date back to the 1870s, and the Cassidy and Clark were relocated and reinterred in the 1950s. And we're happy to say that Chris Florence, our communications director, was at the dedication for that, and we're happy to enter that invitation. We try to go to as many marker dedications as we can, but there's 17,000 markers in Texas. There's about almost 200 new ones every year. We can't go to all of them, but we like to get invited to your Undertold and all marker dedications. So at least invite us, and we promote it on our website and we share it with other people, and we'll make all the ones that we can. Another example in El Paso, the Syrian Lebanese community. This was one of the first markers, I think, 2008 or 9. Talking about ethnic groups that came to El Paso and had a sizable population early on. From the 1880s to the 1920s, the Syrian and Lebanese community, about half of them came through Ellis Island, but about a quarter of them came through Texas, either through Galveston or Port Arthur at the ports, or through border cities, including Laredo and Del Rio and El Paso. And so by the 1890s, there was a sizable Syrian Lebanese community in El Paso. They settled and had shops in and along El Paso Street, kind of concentrated in a few blocks there of El Paso. And so here's examples on the next slides of the information that they turned in. Um, there's their 250 words. You can see they've got a lot of sources on the right from various chapters of books and various articles, and a lot of good primary and secondary documentation for understanding the topic. And then they had some individuals like Joseph Abraham Jr. was one of the leading merchants. You can see he had the Bronco Theater He had the Phoenician Clubhouse there, uh, a notable restaurant. And so this marker was placed. Oh, here's the American Lebanese Cultural Center, um, still there in El Paso, I think, as at least when the marker was put up. And so that marker was placed kind of in the heart of that community. And then more undertold stories to squeeze in some more. The Juanita Craft House in Dallas. Juanita Craft was a leading civil rights advocate. She grew up in Round Rock. Shout out to Round Rock. She went to Hopewell School. Ended up in Dallas, and she was just really a leader in the city. She ended up being, I think, of the city council and the school board, or at least the city council. Um, but when national civil rights figures would come through Dallas, they would often craft ideas and things that they were going to do, at her home. And so this is the home within a neighborhood there. And she helped to integrate Fair Park and integrate things at the schools, and just really a leading individual. And so we were happy to put that marker up there that is also an RTHL for her house. Rube Foster, this was one of the first ones in 2008. That was the first year uh, of Undertold's going out into the field. Started collecting the fee in 2006, built up enough to go make some, and then 2008 was the first year. Rube Foster was a baseball player. He pitched both ends of double headers, like 300 pitches, and won both games back in the 1900s and teens. He helped found the Negro Baseball League that recently Major League Baseball has incorporated the statistics of as Major League statistics. So Rube Foster you might find on some home run and RBI lists now, and pitching lists. And he's from Calvert, Texas, and he ended up in Chicago and is very well known nationally in sports. He's in the Hall of Fame in baseball. So this marker is at a ball field in Calvert, where the Little League kids can read about that. So, where can I find out more information? I hear you ask. We hear you. Uh, have a few more right here. So on the Undertold page, if you go to our main webpage, thc.texas.gov/undertold, or on our main webpage, if you go on the top right, there's a white search box, just type the word Undertold. We've got a marker map there. I think it's got 200, so we need to catch up with our most recent Undertolds, but we've got pins there for all of those. You can click on each one. It'll open up a box that has an excerpt of the text, and then many examples, photograph of the individual or of the marker in place. And we have this web page here for Undertolds um, that divides things out. And so you see it there. It says the Undertold marker application is the first red button. That will give you the PDF that you can fill out and attach to an email. Or we encourage you to use the second button there, submit an online application. That will take you to our new portal. You can create an account and you can upload all your information that way, and you'll be able to track the status of your application, both undertolds and regulars, if you end up doing other ones with us, and see what status it's at for being received, being evaluated, being worked on, and so forth. Let's see. I think we have
I
another.
should also note that the
Yeah,
PDF application will be available. It should be available the month before,
right.
uh, very soon and very soon. The
Yes.
PDF.
Um, that online application button should be fully functional now. If it's not, let us know at markers@thc.texas.gov, and we'll make sure that's up and running in the next day or two. October 1st is the beginning of the application period, but if you want to create your account and kind of see how to upload things, that's fine. If you have any questions, you can contact us. Um, and then starting October 1st, we'll start receiving those and evaluating those that you submit. Um, Here again is that the marker map and an example of one that's a pop-up screen for the Lamesa farm workers community up near Lubbock, uh, and a picture of Emma Tenayuka, an undertold marker in San Antonio for a labor leader, and then Midwestern University desegregation in Wichita Falls. So you can see we try to spread these out geographically by topic, um, and just especially RTHLs if it's a endangered property, and this would help with its preservation. But let us know. I saw a question come by in the chat, and we'll answer them all in just a little bit about letters of support. Let us know the situation with a property that maybe there's a property owner who's interested in saving it and doesn't really know what to do, and so they're just kind of looking for some advocates to come alongside. And how would RTHL fit into that? And we can talk about the timeline of maybe that's something that could help stabilize the building, and maybe tax credits are available to fully restore or stabilize something. Um, but let us know if it's part of a larger project and how it fits in. That's part of the scoring when we talk about um, working with other THC programs. Maybe this is something that is coming to us from the architecture division across the street, or from community heritage, and how it fits into local heritage preservation efforts. And then there's also the main Atlas page on our website. You can see there atlas.thc.texas.gov. If you want to look at the markers that are already in your county or your community or statewide that are similar to what you're considering for an undertold marker, go ahead and look at what's already out there. You can see what we've written on it, if anything. If we haven't, then that's part of your argument to say, I don't see that you have any markers about this topic, and then that'll help that you've run through that. Any of these markers, we also have all the materials for. So whatever they turned in the 70s or the 90s or last week, we'll have the narrative, we'll have photographs and maps and information sometimes. We might have some correspondence as the marker was being done or afterwards from other descendants or from the county doing additional research saying we'd like to add this to the file. So if you find any you'd like copies of the files of, you can request that also at that markers at email, which I think is coming up again in a second here. So just a reminder, the important dates, October 1st and November 15th. That's pretty much the same every year. It might be November 14th or 16th if that's a Friday or something, but those are the dates this year. And then we'll score those in December with committee members from here in the agency from different disciplines, bring it to our commissioners for their end of January quarterly meeting for consideration. And then that first week of February is when we'll let 15 of you know that you are going to receive a free marker through the Undertold program. So here is our contact information for the entire marker program for the entire state of Texas. You get 2/3 of us tonight. There's Alicia, our historian and our main marker writer. I'm the coordinator of the program. Lily George is our office manager and our marker specialist. So some of you may have heard from her. She came on a couple of months ago. But markers at thc.texas.gov. You can reach all three of us. You can request files. You can ask questions. You can send us what you have so far. If you've gotten part way down the application form and you're stuck, you can say, well, here's what I have. What am I missing? And we can provide you with something similar, probably saying, well, here was something similar 2 counties away 5 years ago, and here's what they submitted. And you can try to model it after that as best you can if that information is available. So I think that's the end of what we want to tell you. So now we're going to get to a Q&A session and answer the questions that you've been sending to us.
Stump Bob, Stump Bob.
Okay, everyone. I hope you really enjoyed that. Now it's time to take Q&A. You did see Bob and Alicia's contact information on the screen a moment ago, and hopefully they'll take a quick moment and throw their email in the chat for y'all. But their information is easily accessible through the website, and I did throw in that marker's email address in the chat, so you can go ahead and check that in the chat. So as we go into Q&A, I'm going to go back and start from some of the first questions that were submitted earlier in the evening. So first question is very specific, y'all. Do you know any update on the Undertold Choctaw Code Talkers World War II Undertold marker that might be in Tarrant County?
I think I'll take this one. Yeah, so for those who don't know the background, the Choctaw Code Talkers was submitted as an undertold in 2009 as just Choctaws of Texas. And we took that topic and it it kind of got stuck in the process. It didn't have it had the 250 words, but we had a hard time gathering additional information from that. So a few years ago, we reached out to the Choctaw Nation, me and our tribal liaison, and we've been working to formulate a marker since then. And it is here. The Choctaw Code Talkers of World War I is a Tarrant County-based marker that is the story they wanted to tell. So we said absolutely we want to talk about this really cool story of folks who use their native language in the military a whole world war before the Navajo Code Talkers that are maybe more famous. So the update on this one is that we are looking at scheduling a dedication date. We do have several partners, and so like the city of Fort Worth, the county, obviously, us, and the Choctaw Nation. And we're looking at when the chief for the Choctaw might be available. We're thinking sometime January. So keep an eye out, but we'll let you know.
Wonderful update, Alicia. Thank you. So our next question is querying about how the Undertold Marker program might be affected by various DEI efforts kind of across the state and the nation right now.
Don't know.
Okay.
We get the $100 application fees from new markers each year, and that goes towards Undertold, doing 15 Undertold markers, and then the Friends of the THC are our partners in identifying additional funding to make sure we can get to 15. Because the $100 from 2008 that paid for 15 markers no longer pays for 15 at the current prices. So that's all we know about that.
Thank you, Bob. On that note, I'm throwing a link in the chat to donate to our program to help fund Undertold Markers across the state. Our work is, these virtual events are free, but we do help take your donations to help support our various programs across the state, and this is one of them. So thank you so much for mentioning that, Bob. Okay, so next question. This is about like extra content, in notes, footnotes, parenthetical documentation that seems supportive for the narrative. You want all of that in like its own little format? Like, well, how do you want that sort of documentation?
I think any of those are valid. Any, what's the overarching term for that?
Yeah, what is that?
Citation.
Citation. Thank you.
Citations.
Thank you, historian.
Any citation method will work
Yeah.
at any, whatever is your preference. We just want it to be specific to facts within sentences, or at least within paragraphs. But what we get sometimes is like a bibliography at the end of two things and no citations to where that was anywhere in those pages. That if it comes down to that, between that and a kind of better developed one of a similar topic, we'd hate for yours to score not as well because theirs was, better documented. So control the part that you can of saying, well, we got this fact from here, we got this from here. And like Alicia said, if it's a well-developed, a well-established fact, like this county was founded in 1872, we don't need proof of that. But if it's refining or revising something that's wrong in other sources, like although it says this in the 1880 census, here's the real name, here's the real ages, give us that citation and maybe attach that as correspondence or a newspaper article or whatever else that you're using that kind of refines or corrects something, if that's something not easily available to all of us as researchers.
Yeah, I always think about, make a citation with a future researcher in mind and one that might not have the internet access that you have or the books access that you have. So maybe, and I've even told sponsors, hey, you had trouble finding the deed record because it's wrong. Go ahead and put that in the footnote so that 45 years down the line, when someone else goes to pull that same deed record, they can know from your footnote that it's actually in 3 counties over. So, reading your own narrative with the sort of skeptic in mind of like, well, where'd they get that fact? Who says this? Well, I see it spelled this way in this documentation. Why do you have it spelled this way? That will really help. My own footnote, my own narratives have like hundreds of footnotes. I'm not saying you go crazy like that, but a reasonable amount of my neuroticism.
Excellent.
It's
Well, to
good.
stay on the note of documentation for just 1 second, letters
Mhm.
of support. I
Mhm.
saw that briefly mentioned. Go ahead and just give us a little bit more information about how that strengthens an application. Does it give score, like weight score? Like, let us know.
Yeah, that can contribute. It's not necessary, but one of the scoring categories was CHC and community support, and so there's a difference between a topic submitted to us by an individual of a town who just said, "Oh, I read that this famous person is from here, and that ought to be a marker," and that's fine. But then somebody else says, "Well, this is the old school, and it's been the community center ever since then, and here's our nonprofit and our community foundation writing about it. Here's the mayor. Here's everybody saying this is wonderful, and we look forward to the next thing." That does help in the scoring. It's not required. It's something that the individual committee members will all have access to. So whatever you think is needed in those materials, but also whatever you think is needed in the 250 words to tell your story well, make it so that when we're reviewing 80 or 90 of them, we don't miss what's important about your story because you left that in the narrative that not everybody got to, or it was in the attachments, but put that front and center in your 250 words. But you could even say in your in that, this is why it's important, and it's been rolling along since 2016, and here's some examples of how it's gotten more and more momentum and community support, and then you have your attachments.
Thank you, Bob.
Mhm.
Now we have plenty of questions to go here, but I want to throw it over to Tracy to see if she's seeing any questions submitted on Facebook Live.
Mhm.
I am not seeing anything currently on Facebook Live. Um, I do see an interesting one here in the chat about timeline to when a marker is made and installed.
Mhm.
And I know y'all love that question.
Um, well, for like, let's say that in the period that we're in, if somebody submits one in October to November and it gets reviewed and say accepted at the end of January, if it's ready to go, meaning that they've got their 5-page narrative, they've got their owner permission, everything is squared away, we can get started on that one as soon as we can with our regular workload. Um, Remember that we do up to 170 new markers a year, and so we've also work on those from the paying customers, and we try to work in the undertolds as we can. Um, some of the 15 that we choose are not quite as ready. Like it's a great topic, but we need to get that narrative done, or we need to coordinate something, and so that often goes back to the county historical commission or the sponsor to kind of work on things on those ends and on that end and get things back to us. Um, but then we could say agree on an inscription that goes before our commissioners at a quarterly meeting for them to review it and authorize it, goes to the foundry, and that takes a couple or several months, just depending on their workload. Um, but possibly something by next fall or the following kind of January could be done if it's turned in next month. So it's a long process. We want the inscription to be something everyone's happy about what it says, about where it's going, that it's accurate, that it's educational, that it's compelling. And so that takes time rather than something shallow and kind of more boilerplate that just doesn't tell you anything. So we just want to make sure that's right, but it takes a little time.
Thank you, Bob.
Mhm.
What is the best way to research an older marker that's established, specifically like an initial application?
You want to take that one, Alicia?
Sure. Let's see, an older marker. So if you're thinking about a centennial marker, we don't have any other files on them, unfortunately. So if it's gray granite and looks like a tombstone, or if it is, if it's on the side of the road and it's red granite, the inscription is, and maybe the location is often the only information we have on those. But everything from our metal markers are 1962 and further, we should have something on them. I say something because sometimes it's 2 pages and sometimes it's a dissertation. And there's really no in between. There is an in between, but often they fall in that in between. So you can always email us at markers@thc.texas.gov to request that file. Sometimes we've already scanned it and we can send it to you immediately, but sometimes we do need to go back into the paper files and scan it, and that may take a couple of days. But if you find something, that's where the atlas really comes in. What's already been written on my topic, and what sources may others have that would help me write. So like if you're writing, for example, a marker for a Rosenwald school, you can pull several Rosenwald markers that we've already done that may have relevant sources that you could use in your own narrative.
And the atlas that Alicia just referenced has been linked in the chat. So if we're doing an Undertold online application, the question is, what do you do if the property owner papers aren't ready at the submission deadline?
Is there I forget, Alicia, is there a comment area on the portal? I know they could always put a comment on an email.
There is not a comment area on the portal. There is, however, when you're uploading something to the portal, you can upload multiple files, first of all. So if you need to upload a Word doc that has a note in it, that's perfectly fine. That way you can get comments to us. Also there's a spot for supplemental information or material. You can upload a note in there. That's actually how I got that deed record one. It was like, hey, we had trouble with the deed record, and here it was. And that's where they submitted that note on the deed record. So you can always upload something there. If it's something that we were supposed to provide, like a form that has a correct date or something like that, please let us know, and that is not working or not accessible, and we will get that fixed. But if you're talking something like the city is the landowner, but they're not meeting until November 17th, something like that. I think, Bob, I heard you refer to it the other day as two bureaucracies meeting, right? So Bob, I'll let you answer. How do you take that where you have a bureaucracy process to get the landowner permission, and then what that looks like with our process?
Yeah, I would say give us what you have so far and your best guess of a location by November 15th. That's why we say it's preliminary location. Well, first of all, if you think it should just go on TxDOT right of way on a farm to market road or a roadside pull off on a US highway, because it's just a story of that community or an individual from that place, but there's not really a more specific place associated with them anymore because their home is gone, their business is gone. You can select TxDOT right of way as the default place that will go. And if you're selected, we'll still work with you on, is that still the best place? But tell us what you know and your best guess by November 15th. And that can be, it's city owned, it's school district owned, it's county owned. We're on their agenda, but that's November 17th or it's November 29th or something. And let us know as quick as you can, because there's still time for us to kind of incorporate that into our evaluations before that end of January quarterly meeting. But that's where some undertolds just rest, is that anyone can turn them in. So somebody can just turn one in saying, hey, I think this person from this town ought to have a marker, and there's no landowner information. It's just, hey, here's the kernel of an idea. And we may revisit that later on. We'll send this list to all the county historical commissions and say, here's the 3 that came in from your county. And the CHC might say, oh, that's a great one. We'll pick that one up and develop that more. But yeah, tell us what you know by November 15th. But lack of complete landowner permission is not a deal breaker if you've got a good enough story to be selected.
Well, on that note, what if the landowner is not game to play ball at all?
Then that's not the place where the marker can go. We have to have permission.
The person who has submitted this question asks, is it possible to submit that marker at an adjacent property or somewhere close to where the story occurred?
It needs to have some association with the story so as not to be misleading. Like if we're talking about a building or we're talking about a site, it needs to be pretty close. Like we can say it was at 3rd and Elm Street, and we try to get the right corner of 3rd and Elm Street. But we also can't really we certainly can't impose an RTHL on somebody from across the street or an adjoining lot, but we don't even want to impose like a subject topic from an adjoining property, if they're not amenable to it for whatever reason, we don't want to stir them up, but we'll talk to them about what a subject marker is and what it's for and how it doesn't restrict their property and it's for public education and for all of our benefit. So you can leave that with us if you think that would help from those people from Austin talking to them. Sometimes that would make it worse. But yeah, if we don't have owner's permission, it just can't be done. That's been something on the form since 1962. It's got to have owner permission even for a subject marker.
Yeah, I'll note that we have written many letters, and we're certainly happy to write you a letter that you present to the landowner that says, like, we're going for a subject marker, and that does not restrict what you can do with your property. We have that template already ready for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's wonderful news. And it looks like the last question we've had submitted this evening is a query about determining who submitted an undertold marker, where maybe a county has a CHC wasn't consulted about.
We
Like
try
the
to give
original submission.
yeah, oh, like an older one. We can provide the application form. We need to redact personal phone and email, but it'll still have the name of or the individual or the group who turned it in. But we do supply to the CHCs at the end of this period, November 15th, saying, here's all the ones we received. Some the CHC knew about and some the CHC submitted, and then others are news to them. And that way, if there's any input or comments or suggestions for good research sources, we'd love to hear from the CHCs. And they may be the ones that can help with owner permission or the research or some aspect of it too. But yeah, we can provide an older one. We have to redact some personal information from it.
Got it. Thanks, Bob.
Mhm.
Tracy, I'll turn it over to you.
This was actually a really lively conversation with the questions. Sometimes we don't have quite that many, but it seems like this was something that's really special and important to a lot of people. I know Alicia and probably Bob knows that my family has an undertold marker on private property, and they worked with our family to put it in place. So it is very important, and it's great that we had this opportunity to get the lowdown on how to do it in the best, most expedient fashion possible,
Mhm.
so that you too can submit your application for an undertold marker. So thank you all for joining us. We had a few little hiccups with Facebook Live this morning, or this early when I started the connection, but we will have a Zoom recording, and we will send out an email with that information. Thanks for joining us, and we hope to see you at our October Victorian Spiritualism and Morning Traditions virtual event. Good night.
Thanks all.
Thank you.